I want to tell you about the exact moment a man cut $25,000 from my salary, looked me straight in the eyes, and smiled. It was not a broad, warm smile, nor was it the kind of grin that fills a room with energy. It was small, calculated, and completely controlled. It was the kind of smile that silently declared that he held every single ounce of power in that room and that we both knew it. His name was Preston Croft. He was the chief executive officer of Vanguard Logistics Systems, the company to which I had dedicated 11 years of my life. Preston was 42 years old, always wore a custom jacket that fit him flawlessly, and had the kind of sharp haircut that probably cost more than most people spent on their monthly car payments. He had a quick answer for every question, and not a single shred of doubt about his own decisions. Every time he walked into a room, he made absolutely certain that you knew he was the most important person in it. I was 53. My name is George Vance, and on a quiet Tuesday morning in March, I sat across from Preston in his corner office on the 4th floor. I sat there and listened to him take apart my financial life with the exact same casual energy that most people use to order their lunch. I remember that room with painful clarity. There was a massive glass window directly behind his desk that looked out over the parking lot. The morning light filtering through was flat and gray. His desk was almost completely empty, showing only a closed laptop and a small silver pen that he kept turning over and over in his fingers while he spoke. He had folded his hands before he started talking, looking exactly like a man who had practiced his speech in front of a mirror. He told me this adjustment was all about organizational restructuring. He used the corporate phrase compensation realignment. He explained that the company needed to make strategic adjustments to its compensation structure across senior roles to prepare for the future. It sounded clean, professional, and detached, like a paragraph you would read in a corporate press release. Then he said the actual number. My base salary, which had been $127,000, was being reduced to $102,000, effective the first of the coming month. $25,000 was gone with a single phrase and a turn of a silver pen. I sat with that statement for a long moment. I did not move. I did not let my face change expression. I have worked in intense corporate environments long enough to know that showing pain or anger in a room like that is the same as handing the other person a loaded weapon. So I asked him only one simple question. Is this decision final? He nodded and said it was. Then he leaned back slightly in his leather chair, and that tiny smug smile appeared on his face. He told me he hoped I would understand the bigger picture of what the company was trying to achieve. It was as if he believed he was doing me a massive favor by explaining the shape of the financial hole he had just cut in my life. I nodded slowly. I thanked him for his time. I stood up, buttoned my gray suit jacket, and walked out. I did not raise my voice at all. I did not argue. I did not ask for a few days to think it over, nor did I beg him for reconsideration. I did not tell him what I truly thought of his bigger picture. I walked out calmly, took the concrete stairs instead of the elevator, and went straight back to my desk. There is something crucial you must understand about that quiet walk back to my desk, because it is the one detail Preston did not know, could not have known, and would not find out until it was far too late to change anything. In the inside pocket of the suit jacket I was wearing that morning, folded twice, clean and crisp, was a signed offer letter from Apex Enterprise Solutions, a direct competitor of Vanguard Logistics Systems. That letter offered me a base salary of $158,000 per year. It included a substantial performance bonus structure. It included equity participation. It included full health and retirement benefits. I had signed that letter 4 days earlier, on a Thursday night, at my own kitchen table. So, while Preston Croft sat in his corner office, believing he had just shown me my place and forced me to accept less, the truth was already decided. The exit door was already wide open, and I had already walked right through it. All that was left to do was the formal paperwork. He cut my salary by $25,000 and smiled, having absolutely no idea what was actually happening. And that is where this story truly starts. Not in his 4th floor office, and not with his practiced smile. It starts with a man who had spent 11 years making himself indispensable to a company, who had watched that company slowly stop seeing him, who had quietly built a way out, and who sat in absolute silence while his chief executive officer unknowingly handed him the cleanest exit he could have ever received. My name is George Vance, and this is the story of how everything unfolded. I am not the kind of man who is easy to notice at first glance. I do not walk into rooms the way Preston Croft does. I do not lead with loud energy or manufactured confidence. I lead with my work. I always have. I grew up in a working-class family in the Midwest, where my father worked in manufacturing for 30 years, and my mother handled every single dollar that came through our front door like it was borrowed. I learned very early that the people who actually keep things running are almost never the ones standing at the front of the stage getting the applause. They are the ones in the back, working in the shadows, making sure the building does not fall down around everyone else. I spent my late 20s building deep technical skills in enterprise systems integration. That is the complex process of connecting one company's software to another company's softwares so that information moves cleanly between them. It sounds simple when you explain it quickly, but it is not. When it goes wrong, businesses lose critical data, lose massive amounts of money, and lose their most important clients. When it goes right, nobody notices a thing, which is exactly how it should be. I joined Vanguard Logistics Systems when I was 42. That was 11 years ago. Vanguard builds and sells logistics integration software to mid-size freight and distribution companies. Their clients are businesses that move physical goods, trucking companies, warehouse operators, and regional distributors. These are not glamorous businesses, but they are real ones and they run on real systems. When those systems break down, real shipments get lost and real money disappears. My job at Vanguard was to make sure that never happened. Over 11 years, I became the person who understood how every major client system connected to ours. Not in a general way, but in a specific, detailed, line-by-line way. I knew which clients were running older software that needed custom patches to stay compatible with our platform. I knew which clients had non-standard data formats that required manual workarounds we had built years ago and never formally documented. I knew the unofficial preferences, the undocumented histories, the small but critical details that existed nowhere except in my memory and my notes. I was not just a senior employee. I was the institutional memory of the entire integration side of the business. Outside of work, I had responsibilities that made my salary matter enormously. My wife, Helen Vance, had been working part-time for the past 2 years after a sudden health issue that required surgery and a long, painful recovery. She was doing much better by the time of Preston's salary cut, but we were not back to full financial speed yet. Our daughter, Chloe Vance, was in her second year at a state university. Her tuition, her room, her books, that was all coming directly from us. We had a mortgage on a house we had bought 12 years ago, still with 8 years left on the loan. When Preston cut my salary by $25,000, he was not moving a number on a spreadsheet. He was removing the room we had built between our life and the edge. He was pulling out the buffer that let us sleep at night. He was doing it with a smile and a corporate phrase, without knowing or caring what the number meant to the people who depended on it. To understand why Preston's salary cut landed the way it did, you have to understand what Vanguard looked like before he arrived. The company was built by a man named Walter Higgins. Walter started Vanguard in his late 30s out of a small office with 4 employees and 1 client. By the time I joined, he had grown it to around 200 people and a client list that included some of the most reliable mid-size freight operators in the country. Walter was not flashy. He was direct, fair, and deeply practical. He trusted the people who had been with him long enough to prove themselves. He did not need you to use the right words in meetings. He needed you to solve real problems and keep clients happy. Walter retired 3 years after I joined. He sold a portion of his equity to the board, stepped back gradually, and was fully gone within 18 months of that. I understood it. He had built something real and earned the right to step away from it. But his departure left a hole that the board filled with someone who could not have been more different from him. Preston Croft came in with credentials that impressed the board immediately. He had a Master of Business Administration from a top-tier program. He had previous experience at two startup companies, one of which had been acquired for a significant sum, which the board took as proof of his ability to grow a company value. He was young, articulate, and full of ideas about modernization and efficiency. Within 60 days of arriving, Preston made his priorities clear. He wanted a leaner organization. He wanted faster decision-making at the top. He wanted, as he put it in one all-hands meeting, people who think like owners, not employees. I sat in that meeting and listened and understood exactly what he meant. He wanted people who looked and sounded like him. He began surrounding himself with a small group of new hires. Most of them were in their early 30s. Most of them had business backgrounds. Most of them had limited experience with the actual technical and operational work that kept Vanguard clients functional day to day. But they spoke well, they presented well, and Preston rewarded that. The one who rose fastest was a man named Bradley Ward. Bradley had joined Vanguard 8 months before my salary cut. He was 33 years old. He had a master's degree in business, a confident way of speaking, and almost no direct experience with enterprise systems integration. He had managed a small software implementation team at a previous company, but nothing at the scale or complexity of what Vanguard dealt with daily. None of that seemed to matter to Preston. Within 4 months of Bradley arriving, Preston appointed him as the lead of the Integration Modernization Initiative. And within 6 months, Bradley was made my direct supervisor. I want you to sit with that for a moment. A man who had been with the company for 8 months, who had never personally managed a large-scale client integration, was now my boss. I watched, and I noticed when Bradley presented reports to Preston that were built almost entirely from documentation I had written. My name was never on the versions he presented. I noticed when Preston stood in front of the leadership team and praised Bradley for leading our modernization push, which actually consisted of Bradley putting his signature on my old work. I noticed when my recommendations in meetings were ignored, only to resurface later as Bradley ideas. I had been erased, slowly and with complete indifference. That is a particular kind of injury, because it does not announce itself. It just accumulates over time. I was not actively searching for a new position when Naomi Miller reached out to me. I was frustrated and tired of being overlooked, but I had not yet made the firm decision to walk away. Part of me, the part that had given 11 years to Vanguard, still believed that things might correct themselves. I was wrong, but I had not accepted it yet. Naomi had worked at Vanguard for 3 years before leaving 2 years prior. She was sharp, direct, and knew how to read situations. When she left, she told me privately that she saw where things were heading. She reached out on a professional networking platform on a Wednesday afternoon. Her message was short. She said she was now leading talent acquisition at Apex Enterprise Solutions and thought we should talk. She asked if I had 30 minutes to spare. I replied that same evening. Apex Enterprise Solutions was a direct competitor of Vanguard. They operated in the same logistics software space and had been growing steadily. They had recently secured a significant round of capital and were using it to build out their enterprise integration division. They did not want people with impressive titles and polished slides. They wanted people who had actually done the work. Naomi was clear about that from our first call. She said Apex was not interested in managers who oversaw integrations from afar. They wanted someone who had personally built and maintained large-scale infrastructure. She was describing me. I went through 3 rounds of interviews over the following 3 weeks. Every single round was technical and detailed. They asked me how I would handle data sync failures between incompatible platforms, how I would manage a client migration without service interruption, and how I had dealt with legacy compatibility issues in the past. These were not generic questions. They required real experience to answer well. I answered every single one of them. After the 3rd round, the official offer came in writing. It was a base salary of $158,000, a performance bonus structure, equity participation with a 4-year vesting schedule, and a senior title. I read it twice at my kitchen table on a Thursday evening. Helen was in the living room. I sat with it for about 10 minutes before I called her in and showed her the document. She read it, looked at me, and did not say a word for a moment. Then she said, "Sign it." I signed it that very night. My plan was straightforward. I would give Vanguard proper notice, 2 weeks as required by my contract. Before submitting my resignation, I wanted to spend a few days organizing my key documentation so the handoff would be as clean as possible. I was not going to leave chaos behind. That is not how I operate. But 4 days after I signed that letter, before I had organized a single page of handoff notes, Preston Croft called me into his office and cut my salary by $25,000. He smiled, and you already know the rest. The signed offer letter sat folded in my jacket pocket the entire time. I did not sleep much that Sunday night. I was at my desk by 7:15 Monday morning. The office does not fill up until around 8:30, which gave me a little over an hour of quiet. I opened a blank document and wrote my resignation letter. I kept it short and clean. I thanked the company for the opportunity, stated that I was pursuing a new professional path, and confirmed my last day would be 2 weeks from that Monday. I did not mention the salary cut, and I did not mention Preston by name. There was nothing in that letter that could be used against me. I read it once, made one small adjustment to the second sentence, and sent it to Human Resources at 7:49 in the morning. I copied Preston. Human Resources responded within the hour, confirming receipt and noting my last day. Preston did not respond for almost 3 hours. I was at my desk working through a client file when he stopped at the edge of my workspace. He stood there for a moment without speaking, trying to find his usual superior posture. He did not quite find it. He said, "I did not see this coming." I told him I understood. That was all I said. I did not offer any explanation. I held eye contact for a moment, and then looked back at my computer screen. He stood there for another 3 seconds and then walked away. Those 2 weeks that followed were some of the strangest of my career. Word of a senior departure moves fast. By Tuesday afternoon, I had been stopped 4 times by colleagues asking if it was true. One technician on my team named Roy Jenkins, who had worked alongside me for 6 years, came to my desk quietly on Wednesday morning and asked if there was anything he should know. I told him I was moving on to a good opportunity and had confidence in the team. He did not look reassured. The most telling dynamic of those 2 weeks was Bradley. From the moment my resignation was known, Bradley began appearing at my desk with constant operational questions about client systems, access credentials, and workflow sequences that he absolutely should have known if he had actually been doing the job Preston had given him. By the end of the first week, he had come to me 11 times. I answered every question honestly and completely because that is who I am. But every time Bradley walked away with an answer, I felt a quiet, factual understanding settle over me. The company was only now beginning to realize what it had been resting on. A key portion of our onboarding systems ran on a proprietary integration bridge engine that I had personally written on my own time. I had developed this software at my kitchen table before joining Vanguard, and my original employment contract only granted the company a non-exclusive, non-transferable license to use it while I remained an employee. On the 8th day of my notice period, Preston Croft called me into his corner office. He was trying to look calm, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He opened a manila folder, slid a document across the glass desk, and told me that Vanguard owned the core integration software I had written. He claimed I had signed an intellectual property assignment agreement 3 years ago that transferred all rights to the company, and that this document also contained a strict non-compete clause, preventing me from working for Apex Enterprise Solutions. I picked up the document. I looked at the signature page. My name was written there, but the handwriting was wrong. The slant was too sharp and the letters did not match my signature. I immediately realized what they had done. In their desperation to lock down my systems and stop me from joining a competitor, Preston and Bradley had forged my signature. I did not panic. I kept my voice flat and even. I looked up and told Preston that I had never seen this document before and that I had never signed it. He smiled his usual small, confident smile and told me that the document was in my file, and that was all that mattered. He said they would enforce it in court if I tried to walk. He leaned forward, looked me dead in the eye, and told me that a man of my age could not afford a lengthy, expensive legal battle against a corporation with deep pockets. He wanted me to believe that I was completely trapped. He told me that my career in this industry would be over if I did not cooperate. I walked out of his office, drove to a law office downtown, and met with an experienced intellectual property attorney who had spent decades dealing with employment disputes. I showed him the document Preston had given me, along with several genuine signatures from my tax returns and old company records. The attorney examined them under a magnifying glass, compared the stroke patterns, and told me that the forgery was obvious. He explained that under California Penal Code Section 470, forging a signature on a contract is a criminal act. Because of this forgery, the entire document was void ab initio, a legal term meaning it was completely null and void from the very beginning. It held no legal power, and it could not be used to restrict my employment or claim my code. He assured me that Vanguard could not enforce a single sentence of that document. He explained that a contract born of fraud has no legal existence whatsoever, and no court in the country would recognize it. My attorney immediately drafted a formal letter to Vanguard General Counsel. The letter was cold and precise. It stated that George Vance was the sole owner of the copyright for the integration bridge engine. It declared that the purported assignment agreement was a forgery and therefore void ab initio under California Penal Code Section 470. It warned Vanguard that any continued use of my software after my departure would constitute willful federal copyright infringement under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106. The letter pointed out that Vanguard would face statutory damages of up to $150,000 for each violation, along with criminal liability for the forgery. My attorney sent the letter by certified mail and electronic mail, copying both Preston and Vanguard Chief Legal Officer. He also suggested we send a copy directly to the chairman of the board of directors, ensuring that Preston could not hide his actions from the people who oversight him. The reaction was immediate. Within 24 hours, Vanguard General Counsel Office contacted my attorney. They did not try to defend the agreement. They asked for a copy of our signature evidence, which we sent them. The tone of their communication shifted from aggressive threats to panic. They realized that their chief executive officer and a senior supervisor had exposed the entire corporation to federal copyright lawsuits and criminal forgery charges just to cover up their own operational failures. The general counsel immediately launched an internal review, realizing the massive liability hanging over the company. They knew that if Vanguard had to stop using my bridge engine, their entire enterprise logistics platform would crash, halting client operations across the nation. Meanwhile, back at the office, Bradley was in a state of visible anxiety. He stopped asking me casual questions and instead tried to avoid eye contact completely. He walked around the office clutching folders, his face pale, whispering urgently on his phone in empty hallways. The compliance department began a quiet but rapid investigation into the personnel files. They brought in an independent forensic document analyst to inspect the original copy of the agreement in my physical file. It did not take long for them to confirm what my attorney had already proven. The document had been printed on paper that did not exist 3 years ago, and the ink signature did not match any of my records. Preston and Bradley had tried to play a dangerous game of legal chess, but they had played it with a forged king, and now the board of directors was starting to demand answers. My last day at Vanguard Logistics Systems was a quiet Friday in late March. I arrived at 7:15, just as I had done every day for 11 years. Made coffee in the break room and spent the morning completing a comprehensive handoff document. I listed every database system, every custom data transformation schema, legacy API integration adapters, and server configuration scripts I could put into words. I documented the specific troubleshooting protocols for client sync drops, explaining how to restart the processes in the correct sequence. I did this not because I owed Preston or Bradley anything, but because the technicians on my team, like Roy Jenkins, did not deserve to suffer for their boss mistakes. I submitted the document to Human Resources and Bradley at 2 in the afternoon. At 4, I packed my coffee mug, a framed picture of Helen and Chloe, and my notes into a box. Roy walked me to the elevator and wished me well. I rode down in silence, got into my car, and drove home. I sat in my driveway for 5 minutes before going inside. I needed the stillness. When I walked in, Helen was in the kitchen. I sat at the table and told her everything. She knew about the Apex offer, but I had kept the salary cut and the forgery secret to protect her from the stress. When I finished, she did not say a word. She simply reached across the table, took my hand, and cried. It was not sadness, but the release of a heavy weight she had been carrying for 2 years. The following 3 weeks brought the complete unraveling of Vanguard logistics operations. I heard the details from Roy and other former colleagues who called me privately. First, Hartwell Distribution, our largest client, suffered a massive system error. Their legacy inventory reconciliation database stopped syncing with Vanguard Logistics platform, causing freight trucks to sit idle at shipping docks across 3 states. Every hour of delay cost Hartwell thousands of dollars in penalties. Bradley tried to fix the issue but failed, and the IT department could not find the custom compatibility patch. They called me in a panic. Out of respect for the client and Roy, I walked them through the solution over the phone in 20 minutes. But the damage was done. Hartwell Director of Operations was furious. He contacted Vanguard Board of Directors, stating they had lost confidence in the management and demanding that I be retained as an external consultant at a rate of $300 per hour to oversee their systems. Second, the onboarding pipeline collapsed. The credentials migration was botched by the IT department, freezing all new client setups and halting revenue growth. They had to hire an outside consulting firm, which charged a massive hourly fee and took 10 days just to understand the code structure. Third, the Compliance Committee presented its report on the forged agreement to the board. The General Counsel made it clear that Preston and Bradley actions had exposed Vanguard to millions of dollars in statutory damages under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, and potential criminal prosecution. The Board of Directors took immediate action. They recognized that Preston Croft and Bradley Ward had committed a severe breach of fiduciary duty to the corporation by forging a senior employee's signature, exposing the company to ruinous lawsuits, and driving away the only person who understood their core technology. The board voted unanimously to terminate both Preston and Bradley immediately, effective that very afternoon. They were escorted from the building by security to avoid a federal copyright lawsuit that would have shut down their systems and destroyed their client relationships. Vanguard General Counsel offered my attorney a settlement. They agreed to pay me a lump sum of $250,000 as a licensing fee for the past use of my integration engine, plus an annual royalty of $80,000 for the next 3 years to continue using it legally. My attorney advised me to accept. I signed the settlement, which was drafted by real lawyers and had my actual, willing signature on it. It has been 4 months since I walked out of Vanguard. I want to be honest about this transition. 11 years of my life are gone, and that time does not return. I spent those years making myself indispensable while remaining invisible, thinking they were the same. They are not. Indispensable means they need your work. Invisible means they do not see you as a person. And invisible employees are never protected. They are only exploited until they stand up. The lesson I carry now is simple. When someone shows you what you are worth to them, believe them. Do not listen to their polished promises or their speeches about the bigger picture. Believe the person who cuts your salary by $25,000 and smiles while doing it. That is the version telling you the truth. Today, Chloe college tuition is fully secure, Helen is regaining her health, and our mortgage is on track. I go to work at Apex Enterprise Solutions every day, where I am paid $158,000 and where my expertise is respected. The environment here is different. My manager asks for my input in team meetings, and my colleagues listen when I explain integration architectures. I am no longer invisible. That is not a small thing. It is everything.